Hi guys, so I've tried to make some videos a couple of times the past couple of months, but for some reason it just won't upload to YouTube, so I'm going to try again a different way. But pretty much I have told my husband this a few times, but I've just been really feeling lonely after a couple of miscarriages that I've had, and I really wanted to kind of share my story and document the journey just because so many people think that getting pregnant is so easy, and I mean, I did, and so many people then come to find out that it's not and then end up feeling alone. So I really wanted to kind of share my story just so that I can kind of get myself out there, and other people, if they ever have to go through it, they don't feel as alone. Um, but pretty much, I'm 24 years old. My name's Natalie. My husband's name is Chip, and we've been married a little bit over a year. And a little bit over a year ago was when we decided that we wanted to start trying to have kids. But we didn't want to start immediately. So, like, last August 2017, I completely went off birth control, um, and actually did during that time get a non-hormonal form of birth control just in the meantime, because I'd been on the pill for 5 years. I hadn't had a cycle in 2 years, and I really just wanted to, I guess, get my body back into sync, just because it had been so long since I had had a cycle. And so I also wanted to get the hormones out of my body from all of that time period too. So everyone around me was pregnant. Everyone around me got pregnant so easily, and it was like a first or second try type of thing. And I didn't really know anyone other than in some online communities that I had joined, anyone that had gone through a miscarriage. And I mean, at the time I was 23, I felt like there was no reason that something like that would happen to me. And I just figured I would be like everyone else around me and get pregnant my first or second try, and I was excited about it. So when we first started trying, I had my IUD removed end of November. So around that time was when we started trying. In that first month, I was really devastated to find out that I wasn't pregnant. And I was like, oh, well, like my best friend at the time was pregnant, and it happened to her second try. So I was like, maybe that's just a, fluke. But a couple of months had passed and nothing was happening. And I just felt really weird about it because I was doing everything right. And I don't want to say the name of the medication because I don't want anybody to go off of it without their doctor's supervision or anything like that. But it turns out my husband was taking a very common medication that can cause infertility temporarily in up to like 90% of men that can take it. And we were told that it would take about 70 days for everything with him to go back to normal. And so by now it was about February or March. So I was like, well, you know what? Like, that kind of sucks. Because that's, about 2.5 months. And sure enough, end of April, I got that first pregnancy test back positive. And I mean, I was super excited. I mean, obviously, we had been trying for, I guess, 5 cycles at that point. And so I was like, I've heard the average is, 6 months. So we were kind of right on target. I've been tracking my progression of my pregnancy test lines just because your numbers are supposed to double. But because it was my first pregnancy, nobody seemed concerned about getting my HCG tested or, anything like that. And so I kind of just didn't feel right about how my tests were going up. I mean, I figured if my levels were doubling that it would get really dark pretty fast, and they just weren't. And I finally, on a Thursday, asked if I could get my blood drawn, and they got me in that day and did. But because it was a weekend, they said it might take a few days to get back. So that Sunday, I woke up and I was having some spotting. And, I called the emergency room, I called my parents, I called everybody and looked online, and I read that some spotting in early pregnancy is normal, and, most of the time it's not anything to worry about, just to come in if I started bleeding. And I still wasn't feeling right a few hours later, and I just said, Chip, just for my own, peace of mind, can we go in and just get my blood drawn, see what's going on? And I went up and went to the bathroom and was full on bleeding. I was about 5.5 weeks at that point. So we went to the emergency room. I had my blood drawn, everything. And from that Thursday until that Sunday, my levels were 25 and only went to 47. And at where I was, I should have been in about the thousands. So I knew that that one, didn't work out. But I read that up to like 70% of women can lose a baby their first pregnancy just because your body's kind of getting in sync with everything. And my doctors didn't seem concerned. My OB didn't seem concerned. And she actually, because I was so early, gave me the go-ahead to try again immediately, which we did. And that exact month, it was May at this point, that exact month, I got pregnant again and found out on like June 7th that I was pregnant again. And this time I was feeling really good about it. My tests were progressing very nicely, and I got my levels back after 2 days apart, and they had doubled, and that's what you're looking for, so I was really excited. And one Friday I took a test, and it was like significantly lighter than the one I had taken before, and I just automatically was like, this cannot be happening again. And sure enough, it was. My levels had dropped. And by the way, just kind of a random thing to say, I'm going just kind of through my story right now. I'll kind of delve into the emotional parts of it and everything in a different video. I just kind of for an introduction wanted to kind of share just this plain overview of my story, just to kind of catch up when I make these next couple of videos. So I had that second loss, and I was frustrated because I felt like I was in a limbo because, they don't normally send you to a reproductive endocrinologist or a fertility specialist until you've had 3 miscarriages. So I kind of felt like I was like, okay, well, I've had 2, so that's, 1 in 20. I could have just been unlucky because 1 in 4 women have a miscarriage in general. I was like, it happens, but I'm not going to really stress too much about it. So 2 weeks later, I still wasn't feeling right. I was having a lot of pregnancy symptoms still. I just wasn't feeling right. And I took a pregnancy test, and it was positive. And I was like, there's no way. I had been bleeding for like 2 straight weeks at that point because I had gotten the call that my levels were going to drop on a Friday, but they didn't drop until Monday, or I didn't start bleeding until Monday. And so I went to the doctor, and that Friday I'd gotten my call back that my levels were at like 50, so, very, very low. And I had taken a test a few days later just to make sure that they had dropped a pretty good bit because tests can only pick up, most of them pick up at 25. And so I knew that it had dropped to at least 25. And I got a call back from my doctor after going in and having blood drawn, and my levels were 202. So somehow, some way, my levels had dropped just enough that weekend before I started bleeding, I had conceived, and because it takes about 7 to 10 days to implant, by the time that the major part of the bleeding was done, it implanted and I conceived. And, at first I was really like, this has got to be a joke because it's like, only 1 in 4 have 1 miscarriage, only 1 in 20 have 2, only 1 in 100 have 3, and you're telling me that somehow that I'm on my 3rd pregnancy within 2 months, conceived right before a miscarriage, and somehow that's like 1 in probably like a million, and somehow I'm part of that. So I already knew from the beginning it probably wasn't doing very well, just because I was still bleeding, but my tests were dark, like really, really dark, because I was tracking that progression too, and they just kept getting darker. And actually when I had taken a few days before I had taken a pregnancy test just because I was like, maybe something's left over from the second, and it was dark. It came back positive. And like I said, and I took one the next morning, and it was even darker. And I texted Chip, I was like, this can't be happening. Like, what is going on? So a 48-hour increment, you're supposed to double. Mine went from like 202 to 276 to 320 to then 386. So it wasn't doubling, and because of some pain I was having, they were worried it was an ectopic. So I had the methotrexate shot. So I ended up, that one actually did end up being uterine, and I'll go into that later, but my levels had gone up to 440, and then when you have the methotrexate shot, you go in for an appointment on day 4 and day 7, and that's when the most important part to make sure your levels have dropped is. And mine had. They want to see a 15% decrease, and mine was almost a 50% decrease. And by a week later, when I went in for my blood draw to see, because they wanted to track my levels all the way down, my levels were at 4, and anything under a 5 is negative. So I was very thankful that my levels dropped so fast. But I did get referred to a fertility specialist. I have on Monday a HSG. Saline HSG, because there's an HSG and a saline. And I have my saline this upcoming Monday, so a week from today. I have a good bit of blood work this week. My husband has some blood work this week. He's already had all of his testing done twice now, and everything was fine. So I'm just wondering what it is with me. The only thing that they found, because with my second pregnancy, my levels at like 3 weeks, 5 days, my progesterone was 21. So it was a very good number. They did find that my thyroid when I'm pregnant is a little bit low, and hypothyroidism runs in my family, so I'm not sure if it's that. I don't know if there's a couple of different things that we'll find out, but I just wanted to kind of keep video logs of it just because it's easier for me to talk than type. Everyone knows that I'm a huge talker, so I figure it's easier to kind of watch a video than to read a wall of information. So that's that, and I'll be posting soon a video just talking about kind of my emotions with each one. But if you have any other questions, just let me know. Thanks.